Aloha!
Aloha.
My name is Serge Kahili King. Welcome to the Cooper Center and our Sunday evening talk story. All right. Now, this is a presentation of a worldwide organization called Aloha International. Topic tonight is how to get rid of anger. But we'd like to begin these evenings with a Hawaiian legend. So the legend we're going to tell is a legend that was mentioned of Lonoika Makahiki. One of the interesting things about Hawaiian legend and telling is that there are so many variations on all the different stories. See, there were two kinds of storytelling in old Hawaii. One kind was called mo'olelo. And mo'olelo is, it might be more like a history, more like a genealogy, more like a retelling of events so that people would remember the lessons from them. And it had to be memorized and it had to be recited perfectly and identically every single time. And they had masters of memory in the ancient times, and whose specialty was this kind of recounting of events, recounting of genealogies, and so forth. Then there was a completely different kind of storytelling, and this was the fictional storytelling. And this was often done by shamans or sometimes professional storytellers who traveled around the islands. And this kind of storytelling, ka'au, it was called, which could be translated to mean the learning or the teaching. Because these were teaching stories. They were not just great events and entertainment. They were entertainment, but they also, each one of them, had lessons about the culture, about life, about how to live, about the values of the society, and all that kind of thing. And because they were told in different locations to different people at different times, these kinds of stories had variations. And they might change from island to island, they might change from compound to compound, they might change according to the storyteller who was telling it and what his intention was. So with these kinds of stories we have all kinds of differences. So the people used to drive the Western collectors crazy, trying to do this. Figure out which one was the authentic one. Well, finally they realized they're all authentic. They're just all ways of using a theme to tell different things and teach different things. So the one I'm going to tell this evening is the first one I learned about this character. The man's name was a chief. So let's talk about his history a little bit. This chief, whose name was Lono, actually Lonoika Makahiki. Now, Lono was also a god in the ancient Hawaiian religion system. Okay? It was one of the religions. And whenever somebody wanted to be highly honored, and usually this was somebody who was of the aristocratic class, chiefly class, why, they might be given a name. They couldn't be named directly after the god or the goddess or the high being, but if that name could be incorporated into their name, that was okay. So the god was Lono, and the chief could not be called only Lono, although he might use that as a nickname. He had to have a name to incorporate that. So his name was a name he was finally given. We don't know what his original name was, but the name he was finally given was Lonoika Makahiki. Lono of the Makahiki time, the time of peace. And that was not his first name. So we'll just call him, when he becomes a chief, we call him the Chief Lono. Okay, so we'll start out with him. He was the son of a man, a very famous man in Hawaiian history called Keawe Nui, who traveled around a lot, there's a legend about him that we'll tell sometime, but one of the legends about him was that many of the descendants today are his. He was that kind of guy, both commoners and chiefs. Right? He was the son of another very famous Hawaiian called Umi, who was the son of another very famous Hawaiian called Liloa. So we go from Liloa down to Umi, down to Keawe, and finally one of Keawe's sons was Lono Ikamaki. He was born on Hawaii, on the Big Island. Well, as he grew up, it was obviously immediately seen that there was something different about him. He underwent training with different instructors, and he became a master at a very young age, a master of wordsmithing. Now, this was a highly developed art in old Hawaii. And what it meant in his case, it meant that he was a master of something called ho'opa'apa'a, which in the context translates as a master of debating. And it had to do with the skill of using words in order to outwit or outdo someone you were arguing with. And he became a master of that. And he became a master of riddling. Riddling was another fine art in ancient Hawaii. To be able to speak a riddle that, and have someone else try to figure it out. And so you tried to make it as complicated as possible. There's a simple riddle from the ancient days that I'm sure most people will be able to figure out, just to give you a kind of riddling that they did. This riddle was, they would make a statement. My spring of water in the sky. Well, now we might immediately think of rain, but that wasn't the answer. The answer was a coconut. Okay? Now, when we know about a coconut, we can immediately get that. But to begin with, we don't think of a spring of water in the sky. But the Hawaiians would use metaphor and figurative language in their riddling that could make it very fascinating, sometimes extremely difficult to figure out. There are whole tales about the search for the answer to riddles. At any rate, our Lono was a master of riddling as well, and he could beat almost any opponent. Well, he was not only mentally sharp, but he was also physically agile. He became a master of fighting arts, of the lua, which we know today was a martial art somewhat similar to karate. He became a master of spear throwing, a master of all the athletic arts of the time. In one of the legends, it said that he could face 20 warriors, and they would all throw spears at him, and he would catch all 20 spears. He was that good. Okay. So anyway, his fame began to spread, both for his mental ability and for his physical ability. And he was a good looker too, we understand. The time came, meanwhile, while he's developing and growing, getting to a marriageable age, why on the island of Hawaii, the Big Island, there was a woman considered the most beautiful woman of her time. She was young when she was 15, and that's marriageable age in ancient Hawaii. But she was considered the most beautiful woman of her time. Her name was Kaikilani. And she was supposed to be married to another chief of the island. And Lono Ikamakihiki came over and visited. And she became actually the queen of, we use those terms today, the high chiefess of Big Island. And when Lono came over to visit, he was challenged, and he had to show all kinds of things to show how good he was, and he passed every test and beyond, and everyone was so impressed. All the chiefs on Big Island agreed that he should be the husband of Kaikilani. Now, this was okay with her, because she was watching him do all these great feats, and so she was getting very, very impressed. And he saw her watching from the sidelines, and boy, was she a beauty. So he was very impressed. So when they finally were able to get together, it was a happy union. All right, so there they are, both ruling the Big Island. And everything's going fine for quite a while. And then Lono decides he has a kind of an itchy foot. And, well, he has several characteristics. He had an itchy foot. He loved to travel. He loved to do all these sports. The only failing that he had was he had a very hot temper that had to be curbed and had to be watched. So anyway, he wanted to go visit the islands, all of them. And so, of course, he took his wife with him, and so off they went, and they visited different islands, and he had to overcome challenges, which was fine with him. He loved it. And each island, he went to Oahu, and he went to Molokai and had challenges, and finally went to Oahu, and it was over on the eastern side of Oahu, when they were sitting, he and his wife, having lunch on the beach, with some cliffs up behind him, and they're playing konani. Okay? After they finish lunch, they start playing konani. Now, I don't know if you know konani, everybody. Konani is a board game of ancient Hawaii. Sometimes it would be actually played with a thick piece of wood. Sometimes they'd make holes in a rock, flat rock, in order to play this. And it sort of resembled, it looked like a go board, if you know the Japanese game, but it also resembled checkers because you had to jump people. So one player had little pieces of black lava that he would put in the holes, in every other hole, and the other person had little pieces of white coral that he put in every other hole. The difference in the Hawaiian game was, the objective was to be the last person to be able to make a move. So it took a lot of strategy. You had to kind of arrange things so that your opponent still had one more move to make when you were finished. A very interesting game. And of course, Lono was really good at that. So anyway, they're playing konani there on the beach. And then right in the middle of the game, this voice comes from up on the cliff. And what Lono hears is, "Hey, Kaikilani, this is your lover, Heya. When are we going to get together again?" This voice comes down from the cliff. And Lono says to his wife, "What was that all about?" His wife says, she was so, struck dumb practically because she had no idea what it was about. Unfortunately, she didn't say anything because Lono took that as a confession. And so he got so angry, he picked up the board and bashed her with it. Bam, 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 knocked her senseless. And then got up, gathered his retainers, took the canoe back to Hawaii, just left it there. Kept his anger. Oh, he was so angry about this, and he wouldn't let it go. Well, time passed. Now, in this time passed, first of all, we'll look at Lono, what happened. I said he couldn't let it go, and he kept thinking about it, and he kept getting more angry, and he got so stressed out, and he wasn't paying any attention to his obligation for the people, and he wasn't ruling, he was just thinking about this, and finally the stress got so powerful that he had to get rid of it, and he started going around the country like a crazy man, challenging everybody he saw to a fight. And so he was beating people, and some people he killed, and he just went everywhere like a madman, trying to work off this anger, and yet getting angrier and angrier. And finally everybody just kept out of his way, and he had no more money left to fight. Nobody would come near him, and he went into a depression, which is another stage of anger. And so you're there, and he's sitting there totally depressed, totally useless to his island. And the god Lono came down, but in the form of a man. In the form of a man who was also a healer. And he made a point to do some healing near Lonoikamakahiki. And that's the first thing that sparked his interest away from all this anger against his wife. And he saw this amazing healing happen. And then this guy walked off. Didn't even talk to Lono. So this healer walked off. And Lono got up and followed him. Watched him do healing. More and more and more. And this went on for quite a while until finally Lono stopped him and asked if he could learn what the man was doing. And the man agreed, so Lono became his apprentice and learned all these healing arts, mostly with herbs as well as counseling. And so off he went with, he didn't know it was the god Lono, but off he went with this healer, learning the healing arts, and in the process, learning compassion. Compassion for people in a way that he had never had before. He was always the top dog. He was always the best. He was always showing how good he could be. Now, for the first time in his life, he was humbling himself in order to help other people feel good and get well. And so this went on for a while, okay? Until finally, Lona was back to his own mind well enough that the god saw that he was starting to heal himself, and one day the god disappeared back into Kahiki. And then Lona went back to his compound and began ruling again, but he did it out of compassion, not out of joy. So, back to Kaikilani. Taking her a long time to recover from her injuries. And she was taken care of by the people on Oahu until finally the day came, after this long time passed, when she was herself again, and she was healed and she was beautiful and she was ready to think about living, but at this point wasn't sure she really wanted to. When a woman came to visit and asked for permission to see her, and the woman came in and she knelt down and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry for what's happened to you. I'm so sorry this is what happened." She said, "In a way, it's almost my fault." And she said, "When you were down there and you heard that voice was my lover. And he didn't say your name, that everybody has told me. He said my name. My name is Kaikinani. And he was calling to me to find out when we were going to meet again. And I'm so sorry all this happened to you, but I couldn't tell you before because you weren't well enough." So with this, Kaikilani realized what a mistake had been made. And then she realized how much she loved her husband still. And she decided to try and have a reunion. So she came back over to Big Island. But whenever she came to Chief Lono's compound, he'd turn away. And she'd come another day, and he'd turn away. And she'd come another day, and he'd turn away. And finally, one day, she arranged it, because there, her family was here on Big Island, so she arranged it with some of the other chiefs so that she came to Lona when he was in a position where he couldn't turn away. Okay? I mean, he couldn't turn away. And before he got really embarrassed and could do anything else, she began chanting to him very softly. And he heard his wife's voice, but he couldn't understand it, so he had to stop everything and listen carefully. And as she chanted, she was telling him of the times of loving, of the good times that they had together, of the joy they shared with each other. And as he began remembering because of the chant, he broke down in a good way. His wall of ice, if we want to call it that, they didn't have walls of ice in old Hawaii, but his wall of lava rock, whatever you want to call it, broke down, and he acknowledged her and acknowledged his love for her and welcomed her back in, and they became not only man and wife again, but lovers again. And the whole kingdom was happy, and of course, they all lived happily ever after. Okay? And so that's the story of Lono and Kaikilani. Now, we can learn some things from this story that have to do with the topic we've been talking about. Yes, he was angry, and yes, he got over his anger. Okay, but let's start getting some specifics here so we can understand more of what this is all about. We have in this Huna teaching that we do 7 ideas we call principles that we use for life and living, for solving problems and for healing. And when we apply them to this particular story, so the first one says that the world is what you think it is. Now, let's look at how this applies. It applies directly to that incident where here's Lono sitting down on the beach with his wife, and he hears a voice. But what he hears, and it shows that in spite of all his great stuff, there was a bit of insecurity inside him. Because what he hears is somebody calling to his wife. Yeah, the names are similar, but it takes a little switch of mind to interpret it one way or interpret it another way. See, he didn't stop and say, "Hey, who is that you're calling?" He immediately interpreted it as his wife being unfaithful. So obviously, that had to be a fear inside, or that thought would never have arisen. So he interpreted that. The world became what he thought it was, which was a world in which people were ready to betray you, even the ones closest to you. And so when an incident happened that sounded like it, he didn't stop and wonder which was right. He immediately interpreted it as the worst case and reacted with tremendous anger. Why would he react with so much tremendous anger over one little incident simple like that? Partly because of the insecurity, but partly because in that kind of a situation, he felt powerless. And as we'll talk about more and more, the importance of that when we start getting to techniques for change, it's this feeling of powerlessness that gives rise to anger. Whether it's acute anger that happens in an instant and is over, or whether it's especially chronic anger. The basis of that is this sense of powerlessness. Helplessness would be another way to put it, in the face of a particular kind of situation. The second principle says there are no limits. Now, this principle is based on a Hawaiian word called kala. And the meaning of kala, the most usual meaning of kala, is to release, to forgive the things of the past, to get out from under a restriction. Now, forgiveness then becomes a very important part here, but look how long it took to forgive. And think of how many other people you might know in your life, how long it takes them to forgive, if they ever do. Because, you see, a lot of people don't realize this, there are some preconditions to forgiveness. It's not just the words that you say. A lot of people say the words and then suppress the anger. And that keeps eating away in their body, and they get mental, physical, emotional problems at some point in their life as a result of that. So, it's just not being able to say, I forgive. Two of the critical things that are involved are a state of relaxation and a certain degree of self-confidence. If you don't have these, then it's either extremely difficult or, for some people at certain times, impossible for them to truly forgive something. There's a strange kind of thinking that a lot of people have. Well, it's not really strange, it's first because it's so common, so it's not strange in that sense. And this is the idea that holding the anger, see, they can't do anything about the situation. So holding the anger gives them a false sense of power, of strength, of being able to do something. Well, I can't do anything else, but I can keep my anger. And it feels strong. But it's a false strength based on tension. You know, sometimes, we flex our muscles and we can feel strong when we do that, fine, but not if we keep it up. We'll start to tremble and start to fall apart. But a lot of people keep up the anger because the tension makes them feel strong, and yet, at the same time, the longer they keep it up, the more it's making them weaker. Physically, emotionally, in every way. So this is the falsity of it, that keeping anger gives you a strength in regard to your enemy or opponent or whoever it is you're angry at. And the opposite is true. Most of the time, the person that someone is angry at couldn't care less. So they're holding all this anger against this person, but it's not against this person. The only person they're holding the anger against is themselves, because it's all inside. And yet, it feels better than feeling weak. And they feel weak because they're not confident enough to handle the situation in a different way. So it can, unless there's some kind of change, they can get into a vicious circle here. To the degree that someone learns something that they can truly feel confident about, then they can relax, and then when their mind is open to change in other areas of their life. Sometimes you have to do something else, but often people can get rid of their anger. And I don't mean release it. That doesn't mean anything. You don't release anger. You release the thoughts that produce the anger. It's a different thing. We don't walk around with anger. Let's clear that up right now. Anger is an emotional reaction that exists in a given present moment. It's not a thing. Now, if you express your anger, why, there's a temporary release of tension. And while that temporary release of tension occurs, if you change your mind about the situation so you're no longer angry, you're healed. But if you just express the anger, have that temporary relaxation, and then start thinking again how angry you are, you just build up the tension all over again. And no healing happens. Okay? So expressing doesn't by itself heal the problem. It's just expressing. We walk around with tension, suppressing memories we don't want to deal with or don't know how to deal with. That's what we walk around with. And so it's releasing the tension that color means. Not expressing the anger, which by itself doesn't do anything. So Lola was walking around with all of this held in anger, and the more you hold it in, for some people, the more helpless you feel. And when you reach a certain degree of angry helplessness, it turns into what we call depression, which is like a falling inward, a collapsing inward, where you're so helpless and angry, like you're more helpless than angry at this point, and you can't do anything. Can't even sustain the anger. But that tension is still usually drawn deeper inside the body and still operating. One of the ways, we'll talk about depression as anger for a moment here, because it's a form of anger, directed inward. One of the therapies that's used today in modern medical practice, in standard medical practice, therapy for depression, is to force the person in a depression to get less sleep and to walk more. Well, there's some good, positive concepts behind that. Okay? One of them is that the depressed person tends to stay in bed more because they feel helpless and they don't want to have to get up and face anything to make them feel more helpless. And so having less sleep is going to help them have to be somewhat more active, and then getting up and walking, if it's done in a particular way, can be very effective, because if you set a place to walk to and a thing to do when you get there, even if you consciously don't think it's important, subconsciously, there's a sense of accomplishment. And the more senses or feelings of accomplishment, even small to begin with, that you can do, the more this begins to generalize in your subconscious, and you feel less helpless in your life. And the less helpless you feel, the more able you are to relax more and think more clearly. And it takes some people longer than others. Now, Lono was going to be in this depression state for the rest of his would have been short life, but there was intervention from a master therapist. Happened to be the god Lono in that case, but it could be a child, it could be a book, it could be something you hear on the radio. Anything can work in our lives to change our focus. And the closer that touches something of importance and interest within us, the more easy it is to shift our focus. And the shifting of focus away from what you're angry about or away from your feeling of helplessness is the beginning of positive movement act of healing, which he saw, which so amazed him, because remember, this was a man who was used to creating injury, who was used to avoiding injury, who in the art of Lua had to learn healing too. That's part of that practice, how to heal the injuries. But it only goes to a certain level. And he didn't know how to heal emotional injuries. So here comes somebody with a healing method that he was unaware of, didn't know, that could be learned. See, it wasn't supernatural, because he did learn how to do it. And that gave him a greater feeling of accomplishment, until he began doing it often enough that he felt better in himself, secure in himself. His energy was moving outward rather than inward. See, at the beginning, even though he was good looking and even though he had all these skills, it was always me, me, me. Look at me. Right? Now he was turning that outward. That moves the energy outward, and that act by itself helps relieve depression, because depression is all this energy moving inward. Now the energy is moving outward. Now his body begins to relax. Now his mind begins to clear. Until a point arose where he remembered his duties and then took them up again. Okay? But he had to have this shift of focus. This is third principle of Huna, which says that energy flows where attention goes. And if your attention is always on how you've been wronged, or how helpless you are, all that energy then is going inside, and it can't go anyplace except into more and more stress and tension. Whereas energy flows where attention goes. If you move that attention outward, so does your emotional energy begin to move outward, so does the process of relaxing your body begin. Now, there's another principle we have. The fourth one says, now is the moment of power. So how do we talk about this in relation to anger? Well, in Lono's case, it helped when he became actively involved in the present moment in helping other people. And there's all kinds of ways in which you can bring yourself into the present moment. A woman, an actress named Ingrid Bergman, once said that the secret of happiness is a poor memory. Okay. And made very simply, if you have the ability to forget the bad stuff, most present moments are full of good stuff, if you pay attention to it. To the degree that you can bring your attention into the present moment, and this is where you let go of thinking about the bad past. So you don't let go of the past. You can't do that. We can't touch it, taste it, feel it, do anything with it. So when people say, well, let go of the past, they mean stop thinking about it. And if you can do that and bring your attention into the goodness of the present, then you'll find your mind clearing and your body relaxing. So you can even begin that process using focus, which will help relax your body and relax your mind. And in that present moment, if you're at the same time, your mind is open, learning how to feel more secure within yourself in some area, then that helps. Because then you are better able to put your attention on something you're not as secure about, because you're moving from a secure base. So you're less afraid of being helpless, depending on how fast you move and depending on an individual's makeup. So being in the present moment is a way to help relax the body and reduce, and if you really do it completely, get rid of the anger totally. You stop thinking about the past. Another help is a couple of what I call the most powerful words in the English language. Now these are powerful, just like people talk in Western symbology of a two-edged sword. You have the good side and the bad side. Well, these words are that too, but when you use them on the good side, they're so extremely powerful for healing. The two words are, so what? Okay. Yes, that happened. So what? What's that got to do with today? What's that got to do with me and what I want to do and how I want to live and how I decide to feel? Yeah, it happened, it was bad, I didn't like it, but so what? If you use those well, they're very powerful healing tools. If they can move you away from dwelling on the things that you're doing. Well, that's for the present moment. Now we have another one. To love is to be happy with. It means to be happy with someone or something. Okay? So in this principle, what happened was the healing in this particular case was completed this way. It was done with this principle because what Ikilani did was have Lono recall the good times, recall the good things, recall the happiness. And when he recalled that and brought that into the present moment, he realized how much more important that was, that part of the relationship. And then he began to dwell on that and brought that back into the present moment, and that was his final tool or technique for forgiveness. So memory, remember, memory is about the past. Memory is not the past. Big difference there. Bringing up memories could be memories of your strength, memories of your happiness, memories of good times with someone that you might have gotten angry with about something. This is what can lead to forgiveness. And forgiveness is the state in which you are no longer angry. However you get there. Okay. Forgiveness is not saying, I forgive you. Forgiveness is not a gift to anybody. Forgiveness is a change of mind and feeling in yourself. So that you no longer think angry thoughts about them, you no longer feel anger toward them. We can do this. Remember I talked right at the beginning about how Lono interpreted something? I worked with a man one time, and he had many years of anger. He was in his early 30s, but he had many years of anger toward his mother because she had betrayed him when he was 7 years old. And he kept thinking about this betrayal, and it was getting in the way of his succeeding because she betrayed him, so he was going to expect betrayal from others, and it was really messing up his life. Well, we did a simple thing. I taught him something called a skinny description. And what we did was, I asked him to, he was 7 years old then, okay? And I asked him, without any adjectives, to describe what happened, accurately. Without any adjectives. Well, that threw him for a while because he was so used to putting betrayal in there. So anyway, he did that, he thought about it. What he finally came up with as an accurate description was, when I was 7 years old, my mother left, and I don't know why. Okay. Now with those words, there was nothing emotionally loaded to get him upset. He acknowledged he didn't know why, actually. He assumed, he called it betrayal, and that's what got him all upset, but when he brought it down to the bare bones interpretation, she left and he didn't know why. Then, in his case, he was able to forgive her for having left for reasons that he didn't know. And then he was free. Only took a few minutes for all this to happen. Those were the magic words that helped him look at it differently and feel differently about it. In Lono's case, had the story been about different stuff, it could just as well have been, okay, all right, well, what actually happened there? Well, I heard a voice. And it sounded like a man was calling to my wife. That was an accurate description. And even Lono could have recognized that, described in those terms, beating her half dead with a kanani board wasn't justified. But he didn't. He went on to imagine all sorts of things, and that's what he got angry about. Finally, we get to the, well, not finally, but we have one more next principle, which is all power comes from within. This has to do with developing confidence. And so in developing confidence, like I've said this all the way through, if you can become competent and skilled in some area of life, and it doesn't have to be what the world thinks is important. It has something, all it has to do with be something that you feel good about doing. And it can be extremely simple or as complicated as you like. That's not what's important. The important is, how does it make you feel? And to the degree that it makes you feel more confident, you'll find yourself being able to relax. Now somebody asked me, I did this talk in another place that we call Second Life, Virtual World, this morning. And someone asked me, all right, what's a fast way to do it? Well, of course, there are a couple fast ways. For some people, they're not satisfactory enough, but here's a fast way for you. Learn a posture of your own that makes you feel confident, and keep that posture all the time. And whenever any doubt comes up, don't pay attention to it. So, confident posture, no doubt, you're there. That's a real fast method. Okay? Like I said, not satisfying enough for some people, but it will work if you would apply it. On the other hand, you can work through some of the other things we've talked about. Learning the skills and being able to relax your body. Now, we haven't talked a lot about relaxing your body, although we mentioned it from time to time. This takes us to the last principle, which says effectiveness is the measure of truth. That means however you are able to do it, as long as it works, that's good. So what this tells us is that looking at the different things that we've talked about, let's work on relaxation for right now. To the degree that you can relax your body, however you do that, work directly on relaxing your body. Now, massage, very helpful, if you'll use the relaxed time to change your mind. Otherwise, massage is only temporary. So massage, excellent way to relax the body. Meditation on beauty. It's a beautiful way to just be aware of beauty. It could be a flower, could be a painting, could be nature, could be a person, doesn't matter. But just hold it in awareness. You can watch the waves, look at the wind blowing the palms. And just put all of your attention on that, and your body will relax. And if we're relaxing to the point where you really feel good, it's a wonderful time to change your mind. It's extremely difficult, as I mentioned before, to forgive or to achieve and change your mind about what makes you angry while you're in a state of tension. It's almost worth not even trying while you're all tense. Okay? Get your body relaxed. Then change. And it's so much easier. Sometimes, sort of in a way with this, we say to people, make peace, because some people are angry about the present moment. So being in the present doesn't do them a lot of good. And so for them we say, make peace with the present. However you do it, change your attitude, change the words, change your feelings, change your posture, whatever it takes, make peace with the present. And some people are afraid to do that because they think that the present will last forever if they do that. Folks, that's not life. Life changes, moment by moment, day by day. If you make peace with what is, then it's easier to change, whether you're changing yourself or whether you're changing the situation. So making peace with the present allows you, because sometimes in order to change anger, we have to change the situation. Some situations are like that, but you can't change it effectively when you're under tension. Make peace with it in preparation for changing. Works wonderfully with children, by the way, okay? When they get you upset, or spouses or whoever. Make peace with the present, and then change is always easier. So we can approach this, all these ways of getting rid of anger. We can approach it through the body first. Relax the body so that you can develop confidence and change your mind and get rid of the anger that way. Or develop confidence so that you can relax and change your mind. Or change your mind so that you feel confident, you can relax. Take a trip, okay? Lots of approaches. What I've intended tonight is to give you different ideas for trying things out. And that's our topic for this evening. So, do we have any questions about what we've talked about? Yes?
Could sadness be approached in the same way?
Sadness, yes. We look at sadness, anything which is a form of resistance to what was or what is a variation of anger. And so sadness falls into that category. Regret, grief. Those are all forms of anger. They can all be approached in the same way that we've talked about. All right, yes.
I've been thinking in my life lately, the big accept. Not accept.
Right.
Can you speak about that?
Oh, sure. This falls into what we call rules. And that's such a great topic that I'm going to save that for a moment.
Oh, good.
Okay? Accept. Okay? A lot of what makes us angry are the rules that we make up about ourselves, about other people, and about life. And very often what we're reacting to in a particular situation is not the situation, but the rules that we made up. So, if you have a rule, for instance, that I can forgive everything except. That's your rule. And you have a right to keep it. And you have a right to experience all the consequences of keeping that rule. Okay? We're not here to tell you don't have any rules, but the more aware you are that it's your rule that you're angry about, the more option that gives you to change it if you want, whenever you feel ready to. Okay? So you know, it's not being angry at what happened, it's being angry because of the rule about what happened. That's a different thing. So if you're saying, yes, go ahead.
Now, I am not an advocate for anger, but in the way of acceptance, that's kind of passive.
Sure.
But when you have the protectiveness or being protected in a situation,
Sure.
and that instills anger or adrenaline.
Careful. Different between adrenaline and anger adrenaline.
Okay.
Okay? Now,
Okay, I don't know.
well, okay, well, let me share this. A lot of people, like I said, use anger to feel more powerful, whereas you become actually less powerful. Now, anybody who's involved in martial arts understands, because that's not a passive art, okay? You're out to battle somebody and win. But if you get angry, you're more likely to lose. Because the anger increases the tension in your body and you're less able to move quickly when you have to. You're less able to have a mind clear enough to take advantage of opportunities. Because the tension will diminish your vision and diminish your movement. And all well-trained martial artists know this, and they find themselves able to take the appropriate action to protect or attack as appropriate without any anger whatsoever. And the adrenaline comes from the action and following through with the action. See? So they don't need to put up a wall. Another thing, people think in terms of sometimes putting up a shield. A lot of people in metaphysics do this, okay? And they use anger to strengthen the shield to protect them against the evil. And that has the effect of diminishing their effectiveness, diminishing their awareness, and making it much more difficult for them to change a situation or do anything effective in response to it. See? And they think of it as a shield, okay? In the ancient times, when the warriors used, and Greece is a beautiful example of it, we can use other places too. I think of Greece because one of the best examples of this was in the movie Troy, where the warrior that played by, what's his name?
Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt, okay. He played Achilles and did a beautiful job of demonstrating exactly how shields were used. And shields were used in ancient battle not to protect. They were used as a weapon. They might be used to deflect. But the Romans used them as a protective thing, and we all know what happened in Rome. But in the individual combat, they were part of the weaponry. Okay? Because they weren't being used out of fear. See? When you try to shield yourself, whether you're doing it physically or metaphorically or metaphysically, and you're doing it out of fear, the result is more tension in your body. And the more tension in your body, the more separated you feel, and the more fear arises. So the stronger the protection has to be, which produces more separation and more fear. It's not a very good technique. So when you want to be, let's say, protective of your children, my recommendation is learn skills that will protect them. Those might be mental skills, they could be physical skills, they could be conversational skills, they could be behavioral skills, but your skills.
So when you are protected and you have the wherewithal and anger does come out, and then it seems to turn into sadness.
Well, sure, which is a form of anger. See? So, you don't need the anger is what I'm getting at. You don't need the anger to protect yourself or others. You need skill. Okay? You need knowledge. Then you don't need anger. That goes back to what we talked about, building confidence.
With an angry party, however.
Hmm?
With
An angry party? A person, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You don't need anger to protect yourself from them. Okay? It doesn't work nearly as effectively. Now I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound really strange, but I've tested all these things out. This isn't something nice I'm telling you to do because anger is not nice. I don't go for that. It's not effective, is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay? Now I did this experiment in front of a bunch of people when I was on Kauai. And this man challenged me and challenged this idea. Okay? Now I've done another situation, but I'm going to mention this particular one. He was very angry. He was strong and tough and husky. And he got very angry at me. And he said, I can hit you right now. I said, no you won't. I kept myself in a relaxed, calm state. I said, no you won't. He said, I can just smash your face. His fist was right up there. I said, no, you can't do that. And without any anger, without any tension, but just my steady focus. And he went, ah! Well, that was a relaxation, actually, when you start to think about it.
Did you cry after that?
What?
Did you cry?
Did I cry? I didn't cry. I had no tension.
Oh,
I was in a state of tension. I was in a state of relaxation in which I had no tension. If I'd had tension, what I did would not have worked, it would have provoked him. If I'd said, no you can't, oh man, I'd have had my face smacked. It would have attracted his attack. What I gave him was nothing to attack. And I wasn't being passive in the sense of, oh, I'll just allow him to beat me up and I'll just lay there and get up. No. I was assertively quiet and relaxed. Big difference. Okay? This works with animals too. Works with all kinds of situations which you can find yourself with someone who's angry. Now, it takes some practice, I have to admit, but the practice doesn't cost anything. And so it's worthwhile being aware of your body, aware when the muscles tense, and aware enough to relax them when you want them to be relaxed.
Serge, a good example is having fear around a dog.
Oh yeah, sure. And for some dogs, that provokes them. Sure. And so learning how not to have fear is something I had to do over many years. Because my earliest memory, I can remember there was a dog, and I was 3 years old, and I saw this dog clear across the courtyard, and I froze. And the dog came over me. It was a tiny little snotty dog, okay? But I was totally frozen, and it came over and it licked my shoe. Oh, okay. That was the beginning of my healing. But it did take me more years of awareness of my reactions, consciously learning how to change them when I had them. Okay, so I didn't have me to teach me at that point. Okay. Would have speeded a lot of things up.